I often find myself lost in the warmth of treasured memories, moments that form the foundation of my life as a mother. I think back to those early years when little Mark would run into the kitchen, his laughter filling every corner with joy. He was the light of my life, and I can still hear the echo of his small feet pattering against the tiled floor. A simple smile or a goofy face made the long hours I worked at the diner fade away. Each dollar I earned wasn't just a wage, it was a step toward giving him everything I had never had. Those nights, working double shifts while balancing school meetings, felt never-ending. Each time I returned home, my body ached, but I pushed through. I remember making him study while I prepared dinner, the fragrant smell of garlic and olive oil wafting through our small kitchen. The warmth of that space enveloped me, reassuring me that, despite the grind, I was building a better life. I still picture our Sunday rituals, the way we would huddle at the table, the centerpiece, a bouquet of flowers I picked from our small garden. The air would be thick with the smell of slow-cooked tomato sauce bubbling on the stove, while Mark excitedly recounted his week. The pride I felt swelled inside me. He was thriving. Every award ceremony and after-school performance left an imprint. These moments strung together, creating a tapestry of our shared love. Yet, I also carry the pangs of sacrifice. I remember the day I stayed up late sewing a costume for his school play, only to realize it was just a passing moment for him. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered after I handed it over, but I felt the gravity. What would it take for him to truly appreciate all I gave? I pushed the worry aside and focused on seeing him succeed, even spending my meager savings on his tutors. Each lesson felt like an investment in his future, the hope that he'd inherit something greater than my simple upbringing. As the years passed, the balance began to shift. I recall the moment he brought Sophia home for the first time. She stood in the doorway, oblivious to the way I instinctively straightened the tablecloth, as if that small act could somehow prepare me for the whirlwind that was about to descend upon my life. Her presence dazzled and distracted him, almost blinding me to the storm lurking beneath her smile. At first, I welcomed her, saw in her the promise of companionship for my son. I hoped she might love him as fiercely as I did. But something shifted. I started to notice her offhand comments during family dinners, subtly belittling my old-fashioned way of doing things, making me feel like an odd relic rather than a pillar of strength. Her eyes would gloss over when I spoke about my pride in Mark's accomplishments, as if my affection smothered the air between us. In the days that followed, Mark grew quieter, caught in a delicate dance between loyalty and love. I still remember his laughter echoing through the walls of our home, but instead, the joyful sounds began to fade, replaced by my own uncertainty. At times, I would glance at him, desperate for reassurance, but his gaze was often cast downward, avoiding my eyes. As I look back now, it hurts to recall the first hints of Sophia's control. I feel the tension in the household tightening, the love I poured into every meal and moment dulled by her presence. I try to shake off the feeling, believing that family ties would weather this storm, but a small voice within me whispers that things are changing. And change, I realize, is the tidal wave converging on my cherished memories, threatening to wash away everything I sacrificed for Mark. Each idyllic moment grows dimmer as I brace myself for what lies ahead, not yet aware of the full extent of Sophia's influence. But I swear to myself then, I will protect my bond with Mark. I will fight to be seen, felt, and respected. Mark's wedding day arrived like a summer storm, exciting, yet fraught with an electric tension that made my heart race. I stood in the church, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, a nostalgic navy blue that mirrored the melancholic vitamins of the day. As I watched him stand at the altar, beaming with pride, I was filled with love, mingled with a sense of foreboding. This was the moment he would begin a new chapter, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the storyline was shifting in a way I could not control. As Sophia walked down the aisle, I marveled at how radiant she looked, her gown flowing like a cascade of shimmering waves. The whispers of admiration from friends and family brought warmth to my heart, a bittersweet blanket wrapping me in a complex mixture of pride and dread. But as I caught her eye, I felt a chill skitter down my spine. Her smile seemed forced and predatory, like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Their vows were traditional, familiar, yet each promise exchanged felt like a silent rift opening between us, a gulf shaped by Sophia's unyielding confidence that pushed me farther away from my son. I stood, a proud mother, as Mark declared his love and commitment, yet within that swell of joy lurked the vague realization that I was losing him to a new allegiance. The reception was a blur of laughter and manicured decor, but I felt strangely adrift. Sophia maneuvered through the crowd, charming our guests, her laughter ringing brightly as she wove narratives around her life. But behind that laughter, I could sense the subtle undercurrents of her derision creeping toward me, distancing me from the festivities. "Eleanor dear, why aren't you dancing?" She leaned toward me, and I caught the glint of amusement in her eyes. I forced a smile, shaking my head in gentle refusal. My old heart felt heavy. The weight of what I could no longer share with my son felt suffocating. "Come on, no one's going to bite." Her tone dripped with mockery as she brushed past me, the faint scent of her expensive perfume lingering like a cloud of judgment. I watched as she beckoned Mark to join her on the dance floor, and for a fleeting moment I felt invisible, an apparition watching as the living thrived without me. As the evening unfurled, I consoled myself with familial faces, but I could feel the dissonance. During the toast, I offered my own, a short and heartfelt speech about love and unity. "Family is everything," I said, eyes glistening with depth, "and together we flourish." But Sophia interrupted with a laugh that echoed too loudly, casting a shadow over my words. "Ah, come on! We all know Mark wouldn't be where he is without me now," she said, flipping her hair back as several guests joined in on her laughter. I felt a flush of humiliation wash over me, and in that instant I glanced at Mark. He smiled weakly, his hand hesitatingly clenching. He was caught in that space between affection and allegiance, the very balance that only seemed to tip further toward his new wife. Their marriage quickly became defined by subtle jabs at my person. Sophia often attempted to flaunt her modern ideologies, ridiculing my nurturing habits. I recall her sneering as I pulled out the casserole dish, proclaiming, "Home-cooked meals are just so last century, don't you think?" I felt myself deflate under the weight of her disdain, my efforts brushed aside as if they were nothing. The silence that followed echoed louder than her words as Mark stared blankly, not offering a defense or acknowledgement of my feelings. It took me weeks before I could see Sophia's true colors, hidden behind layers of charm. A corner of my heart groaned in resignation, each minute detail adding to the weight of misunderstanding. The holidays began to reflect this change. Our family gatherings grew more fractured. Potluck dinners evolved into events where I felt the chill of Sophia's disdain permeating the atmosphere. "Eleanor, I'm sure your classic potato salad is a hit at the community potlucks, but this is Christmas. We need something fresh, like a quinoa salad," she chirped one evening, practically bouncing on her toes. I could practically feel her laughter pierce through my facade. It left me hollow, the taste of bitterness and humiliation swelling in my throat. In private moments with Mark, I'd attempt to share my heart, but he became shielded, a wall erecting between us. "Mom, it's just her way of being fun. You shouldn't take it personally," he would soothe. Yet inside, I knew her words were barbed arrows aimed straight at my heart. The dynamic shifted. Where my son had once found comfort and wisdom in my presence, he began to view me as a relic from an era he'd purportedly moved beyond. Each jab Sophia made chipped away at my sense of worth, leaving me feeling more isolated than I had thought possible. The love I had built over years was suddenly up for dispute, jeopardized by her manipulative quips. The bond I cherished with Mark began to flicker like a dimming candle, and I felt the urgency to protect it as if it were the only warmth against an encroaching coldness. But deep in the recesses of my heart, I promised myself that I wouldn't let this new wave of hostility drown me. I refused to be reduced to a mere afterthought. I held on to my memories, the moments where love had triumphed, savoring them like precious gems, hoping they could shield me from Sophia's looming shadow. As the seasons turned, my home morphed into a battleground of unspoken tensions and forced pleasantries. Family gatherings transformed into ceremonies, where I stood in the shadows, my smile a mask barely concealing my hurt. The invisible barrier between my world and Sophia's seemed to widen each day. I felt I was fading, an afterthought in my son's life, overshadowed by his new wife's vibrant presence. Mark's birthday party was a particularly poignant moment. I prepared all his favorite dishes, slaved over a chocolate cake, and went the extra mile to create a festive atmosphere. But as guests arrived, I quickly realized that my presence felt more like a ghost haunting the celebration than a participant. The laughter and chatter in the room enveloped me, yet I felt utterly alone. Sophia seized the opportunity to host the evening like a master conductor. "Let's toast to my husband," she announced, raising her glass with an exuberance that echoed through the room. "To Mark. He deserves all the best things, especially now that he has me." Her words resonated, but the sting of humiliation pricked my heart as the guests cheered. Mark raised his glass, a smile on his face, but it seemed almost obligatory, like he was supposed to agree with her proclamation. I was left standing at the edge of the table, clutching a serving spoon, feeling invisible. The cake's grand entrance was the final sting. When I placed it lovingly on the table, Sophia leaned in toward Mark, her laughter bubbling over. "Ah, this is so quaint. A little throwback to the days when dessert was just dessert, right?" Her smirk cut through me like a jolt. I could barely muster a smile in return, the weight of her comment scalding my pride. The laughter around me rang like bells of judgment, drowning out the warmth of my intentions. Later, as I retreated to the relative safety of my bedroom, I took a deep breath. Time spent alone in silence became dotted with reminders of a past where I felt valued and cherished. I clutched a framed photograph of Mark as a young boy, chocolate smeared across his cheeks, his eyes sparkling with innocence and joy. I longed for that connection, the authenticity we once shared unmarred by Sophia's shadow. With the holiday season approaching, I found myself reflecting on the growing distance. At Thanksgiving, a similar incident unfolded. While I was preparing the stuffing, Sophia interjected with a flourish. "Eleanor, bless your heart, but don't you think we need something fresher, like a quinoa salad?" The words dripped with condescension and felt like needles puncturing the facade I struggled to maintain. "Thanksgiving is about tradition," I managed to reply, each word slipping out as a quiet affirmation of my identity. Yet the casual cruelty in Sophia's tone hung in the air, unanswered. I could see the amusement flash across the faces of the guests as a crushing sense of isolation washed over me. Dinners turned into an emotional marathon, each moment a test of endurance against Sophia's subtle barbs. I stood at the edge of the table more often than not, feeling like the extra chair that no one dared to pull out. Mark, oblivious in his happiness, became wrapped up in the laughter she commanded so effortlessly. Even when I tried to share cherished family memories, the ambience shifted, lacking cohesion, a well-rehearsed play with no room for my character. Despite the painful reality, I began to see glimmers of hope. During one dinner, I resolved to stand firm amid the growing hostility. In a moment of determination, I pulled Mark aside while Sophia chatted with a friend. "Mark, I want you to know how much I love you," I started, my voice soft yet clear. "And I hope you see how much effort I put into these gatherings, these traditions. They matter." His nod was hesitant, but I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I chose to believe he still cherished our bond beneath Sophia's overwhelming presence. During meals thereafter, I began to counter her remarks with my own steady voice. I shared stories that painted our family's history, the love and sacrifices woven within, hoping to remind both Mark and myself of the foundation we had built together. I noticed a change in Mark's demeanor, the laughter blossoming in response to tales from his past, little moments that seemed to soften the edges of Sophia's grip on him. I chose to rise above the cruelty, letting nostalgia light my path. Each recollection became a gentle clap of defiance against the walls Sophia had erected between us. It was a quiet rebellion, but one that made me feel alive again, giving me back the agency I was losing. While Sophia's laughter seemed to incite ridicule, I fought against the tide with dignity. I held on to my identity as Mark's mother, protecting the integrity of our bond. I would confront the habits that discredited my place in their lives, even if it meant reclaiming my voice in whispers against the cacophony of Sophia's laughter. Armed with newfound resolve, I began to explore the power dynamics at play. I would gather evidence of the manipulative comments and instances where she commanded the narrative surrounding our family. This wasn't just about me anymore. I had to pave the way for my son to understand the value of love over control. With each family gathering, I felt the urgency to gather my thoughts, prepare myself to confront the subtle manipulations that had woven themselves into our dynamics. The stakes grew higher, especially as holidays approached, filling the air with both joy and dread. I began to document the interactions, noting the jabs and sidelong glances that often left me breathless. I took to writing in the quiet hours of the night, my journal becoming a repository for my thoughts, feelings, and those moments that left scars. Each entry served as both a release and a blueprint, reminding me that I was not overreacting. There were patterns, trends, and a clear agenda behind Sophia's cheerful facade that I needed to illuminate. I hosted dinner one evening, a calculated move that would allow me to steer the narrative, even if just a little. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the kitchen as I laid out a feast of comfort foods, buttery potatoes, green beans sautéed with garlic, and a pie bursting with apples. Despite the scent wafting through the air, I felt a knot twist in my stomach. Sophia sauntered in just as I was pulling the warm pie from the oven. "Eleanor, how charming that you're trying to impress us," she remarked, glancing at the pie as though it were an artifact from a garage sale. There it was, the familiar sting that ignited a fire in my belly. Nothing like warming the old heart with nostalgia, right? Her tone dripped with insincerity, and I could feel the laughter bubbling beneath her words. "Tradition has its place," I replied, summoning the strength to keep my voice steady. "No matter how the times change, comfort food doesn't." Subtle victories were important. I was learning that for every barb she threw, I could respond firmly without losing myself. Throughout the evening, I made it a point to engage with Mark, sharing details of recipes passed down through generations. I noticed how he leaned in, intrigued. When I recounted how his grandmother used to bake pies on rainy days, a flicker of nostalgia passed over his face. "I miss those days," he said softly. Sophia, who had been laughing with her friend across the table, suddenly redirected her attention. "Oh, come on, Mark. The only thing that really mattered back then was how your mom would rebuild her confidence with flour and sugar." Her smirk felt like a slap. Yet, I remained calm, internalizing the hurt. I had to see beyond her hostility. She was manipulating the narrative. She needed to feel superior, to push me deeper into the shadows of my own home. I pushed past the sting, my finger tracing the rim of my wineglass. "What matters is sharing those memories," I replied firmly, my eyes locking with Mark's, which held a hint of confusion. That night, after the guests left, I found myself alone, grappling with the mixed emotions of the evening. I sensed the space between Mark and me shifting, and that was enough to bolster my resolve. Context underlined my documentation. I began tracking specific moments when Sophia belittled my contributions or twisted conversations to highlight her superiority. Each entry provided structure to the chaos swirling around me. I recalled another dinner, Sophia's way of dismissing family traditions, referring to long-standing recipes as outdated. Unbeknownst to her, I was preparing for a future confrontation, gathering not just my thoughts, but also tangible evidence of her comments. Every dismissive comment became fuel for my eventual strategy. I continued to gather my power through the stories intertwined within our family history. I reached out to distant relatives, friends who shared their connections to our past. Valuable memories surfaced, and I began to weave them together, quietly crafting a narrative that highlighted my love and commitment to our family's legacy. Encouraged by those interactions, I felt exhilarated but wary. I knew I had to carefully measure every step. I wished to show Mark the quiet storms raging beneath Sophia's facade without triggering his defensiveness. Conversations about childhood memories began to take on a new layer of significance. During one family dinner, Mark's curiosity was piqued as I brought up stories of my own upbringing, the family rituals I'd cherished, and how they shaped my views on love and resilience. Each narrative served both as a reminder to him and as a testament to my strength. I watched an evolving sense of recognition flicker in his eyes, a soft reminder of the shared history that connected us even in this distant space forged by Sophia's presence. But every small victory came at a cost. The tension with Sophia grew palpable. She began to rally the family against me, spinning tales of my supposed bitterness as her covert operation. I felt increasingly exposed, but I reminded myself of my mantra: they can mute me at the table, never in my heart. Each time she attempted to ascend her creative manipulation, I felt my resolve strengthen. I would reclaim my dignity, one small crack at a time, setting boundaries where I had allowed them to blur. Armed with a strategy, I pinpointed that I could not merely fight against the subtle jabs. I had to expose the underlying manipulations while holding my ground. I would not allow myself to be cornered, and if engaging through the lens of nurturing conversations could open the door to clarity, then that would be my approach. Sophia's disdainful remarks would no longer diminish my dignity. Rather, they fueled my determination to reclaim my space, my identity within this family. As I gathered stories, evidence, and fortitude, I could feel an inner shift. I was preparing to stand tall, to confront the wounds that had been inflicted upon me, and the family dynamics that needed transformation. I could begin to weave my resilience together with the love I held for Mark, transforming pain into purpose. The emotional tidal wave was building, and I could feel the swell beneath me. With each family gathering, the stakes rose higher. I approached the next few months with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to break through the fabricated narrative Sophia had spun around me. I brooded over my notes, each entry detailing Sophia's manipulative tactics and interactions, crafting a map of my position in this intricate web of dysfunction. As the holiday season approached, I realized this would be my chance, a perfect opportunity to navigate the gathering storm. Thanksgiving dinner would be the grand stage where I could confront tensions and garner the love I had sought so desperately to preserve. Would Mark see through the facade Sophia had created? Would he recognize her strategies as blatant attempts to rewrite our family history? Preparing for the holiday felt like training for a race. I involved myself in kitchen preparations, pouring my heart into the meal plans. I aimed for the traditional feast, turkey, stuffing, and all the trimmings. The aroma of roasting turkey would fill the house, pulling us back into the warmth of familiarity. Yet, an undercurrent of anxiety coursed through me. I began to hesitate at moments when I should have been firm, but each morning of that week brought me closer to the resolve I needed. The evening before Thanksgiving, I paced my kitchen, my thoughts racing. My granddaughter Emma had just arrived, her wide eyes sparkling with excitement. It reminded me of how Mark used to beam as a child, overflowing with joy during family traditions. Emma's laughter echoed, a sound I'd longed to hear. "Grandma, are we having your famous stuffing?" she asked, clapping her hands. "Yes, my dear," I smiled, my heart swelling at the thought of her digging into that savory goodness every holiday. I used it as fuel, fanning the flames of my determination to reclaim what was rightfully ours, a solid family foundation built on love and stability, not Sophia's manipulative grasp. On the night before the feast, the idea that I could gather strength through nostalgia energized me. I called Mark, hoping to feel the bond we once shared as unbreakable. "Mark, I really would love for you to come over early tomorrow. I'm going to need your help in the kitchen." "Oh, sure, Mom," he responded, enthusiasm lacing his words. As I hung up, a sense of victory washed over me. My heart fluttered with hope as I pictured us together in the kitchen, baking, laughing, bonding over the memories that had been suppressed for so long. Thanksgiving arrived, and I buzzed around the kitchen with excitement. The smell of turkey roasting filled the air, mingling with the sweetness of pie as it baked, transforming our home into a haven of memories. Decorations adorned the living room, a potpourri of family photographs and holiday ornaments, a tapestry of our shared history that had been buried beneath layers of tension and hostility. But as the doorbell chimed, my heart skipped. Each chime reverberated with both hope and fear. When I opened the door, there stood Sophia, chic as always, displaying her curated brand of charm. "Hello, Eleanor. Hope you didn't burn anything this year." She smiled, with a hint of condescension barely concealed under her sparkling voice. "Welcome, Sophia," I said, keeping my tone even. "We're all set for a wonderful dinner." She strolled through the house, assessing my efforts with an arched eyebrow, her silence communicating more than words could. I offered a smile and then turned to the kitchen, steeling myself against the inevitable remarks that came as we set the table. Once my family had gathered around the large lumbering table, I took a deep breath. I could feel the subtle vibrations of tension in the air. Everything I held onto for stability wavered as Mark arrived, still carrying remnants of hope. "Mom, the turkey smells amazing," he exclaimed. My heart swelled at his genuine compliment. "Thanks, sweetheart. I've made your favorites, all your grandmother's recipes. Just like we used to have, I said, the words pouring out from a well of nostalgia. Sophia leaned in, arms crossed. Isn't it a bit quaint to cling to those outdated recipes? I mean, have you considered modernizing? Maybe a kale salad instead? Before I could reply, I felt the burn of humiliation rising, but I sensed my moment was near. Tradition is what binds us, Sophia, I said, my voice calm but firm. Sometimes the past is worth holding on to. The atmosphere shifted slightly as if the air thickened with tension. Mark's expression changed, uncertainty washing over him as he glanced back and forth between us. This was what I had hoped for, a moment of clarity, a chance for him to witness the dynamic openly. Dinner commenced with a social interplay of humor and banter. As laughter sprinkled across the table, I felt my heart strengthen. I wove memories into the conversation, gently steering discussions toward cherished family moments. Each laugh that occurred infused the weight of history with warmth. As the evening wore on, I could feel Mark obtaining a sense of the true nature of the gathering. He observed Sophia's jabs. I could see it in his shifting expressions, a flicker of realization dancing behind his eyes. I offered personal anecdotes, shining light on the connections we held dear, and Sophia's comments steadily began to appear as hollow. By dessert time, a considerable shift had occurred. Mark leaned in, capturing my gaze as I served the pie. "Mom, I remember that time you made this for my birthday, and I ate half myself," he laughed, a genuine note in his voice. "It's still my favorite." "Yes," I responded, my heart soaring. "And you promised to help me make it next time," Sophia interjected with a scoff. "You shouldn't have indulged him so much. It's no wonder he can't care for himself now." But I was ready. "I taught him love through food, Sophia," I replied, my voice so steady it surprised even me. "It's not just a pie, it's tradition, a bond." Mark shifted, the faintest frown forming as he realized the tension we were navigating. This was the crux, where the illusion of Sophia's perfection began to crumble. As the night came to a close, the atmosphere buzzed with an unexpected warmth. It felt like both victory and defeat intertwined. For the first time in what felt like ages, Mark embraced me tightly at the door. "Such a great dinner, Mom. I miss this," he murmured, his sincerity washing over me like balm on a wound. And as the door closed behind them, I leaned against it, feeling the burn of tears in my eyes. I realized that even amid Sophia's attempts to erase my place, I had carved a space back into my son's heart. My resolve solidified, and my mantra echoed in my mind. "They can mute me at the table, never in my heart." This would be the first step. I would gather more moments like this and build upon them, fortifying the bond with Mark while slowly uprooting the weeds of Sophia's cunning narratives. I was prepared to reclaim our history, one shared story at a time. The echo of that Thanksgiving night lingered in my heart like the last notes of a favorite song. Although it had ended with warmth and connection, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the calming before the storm. I felt the resolve within me harden. If I was to protect my bond with Mark, I had to confront Sophia directly. There could be no more avoidance, no more passive resistance. Weeks passed and winter deepened, wrapping the world in a blanket of white. I focused on strengthening my connection with Mark, making subtle shifts in tone and approach that encouraged him to share more about his life with Sophia. Sometimes he would glance at his phone, where Sophia's texts would ping like alarm bells in the background, reminding me of the encroachment she still posed on our relationship. Every family gathering further fortified the tension. I watched as Sophia continued to chip away at my credibility, undermining me in conversations, smirking at family moments I held dear. It felt like I was playing a game of chess where my pieces were almost tipped over, teetering at the edge. Yet, in those weeks, moments of bond began to blossom like resilient flowers pushing through the snow, the dinners we shared, the occasional rides to and from work, the soft laughter that arose when I told him stories of his childhood. Each moment served to ground us both, and slowly Mark began to see the fractures that Sophia created. I felt the barrier lifting between us, one tiny piece at a time. Finally, the moment arrived for me to put my strategy into action. I invited Mark over for coffee on a quiet Sunday morning. I had decided to create a space where we could talk without interruptions, his favorite coffee mug waiting by the pot just the way he liked it. The comforting aroma filled the air as I arranged the table, my heart quickening. I sensed the urgency lying just beneath the surface. As he arrived, he stepped inside, grinning, the snow melting off his shoes. "Hey, Mom! Smells amazing in here," he called out. "Just like your childhood." I smiled, gesturing for him to sit down. "I wanted to talk to you about some things." Mark's smile faded slightly, and I saw the concern flicker in his eyes. The tension in my chest seemed to squeeze tighter as I poured his coffee. "What's up?" I took a deep breath, steadying the thoughts that swirled in my mind. "I know things have been complicated lately between us and with Sophia," I began slowly, choosing each word with care. "I think it's important to discuss how much her words and actions impact our relationship." Mark opened his mouth to speak, but I pressed on, determined to let the truths surface. "For years, I have loved you and supported you, Mark, and I felt increasingly sidelined since Sophia came into the picture. She often undermines who I am and what I've contributed to your life." His brow furrowed. "Mom, I didn't know you felt that way. I mean, she can be kind of harsh, but..." "No, it's not just harsh," I interjected, my voice firm but gentle. "It's hurtful. I've watched her dismiss our family traditions, mock my cooking, turn our memories into a punchline. And you, my dear son, you sit silent, as if you don't notice it. It's like my essence is being stripped away." Mark leaned back in his chair, visibly taken aback. "I honestly thought you were just being sensitive," he admitted. "That's part of the problem," I replied softly, the warmth of the coffee in my hands grounding me. "I've become the sensitive mom, and while I know that's not who I am, the way Sophia talks undermines my role in this family. I want you to see that." I watched as Mark's internal gears shifted, absorbing the layers of what I had just revealed. "I appreciate you sharing this with me," he said finally, his voice quieter. "But it's complicated, you know. I love her too." "I know, Mark," I said, maintaining eye contact, "and I never want you to choose between us, but it feels like Sophia continuously redraws the lines between us. I don't want to be an afterthought or a relic of your past. I want to keep being your mother, part of your life." The pressure in the air seemed to intensify as silence enveloped us. I could see the conflict etched across his face. However, inside me, my mantra thrummed like a heartbeat. "They can mute me at the table, never in my heart. I would not be diminished. I would be heard. I just need you to understand how I feel," I continued carefully, "and that this is about building a bridge, not a wall. I want to reclaim my space in our lives, and I want you to feel comfortable speaking up when things are wrong." Mark shifted in his seat, the clarity of my words penetrating his thoughts. "Mom, I'll try to be more aware. I guess I didn't realize how dismissive she could be. I hadn't seen it through your eyes." As the conversation reached its climax, a sense of vulnerability settled over us. I felt the tension in my chest unfurl slowly, like the spring thaw melting layers of ice. There was hope flickering in the air, the seeds of understanding taking root. "I know this won't happen overnight," I continued, as we both processed the gravity of our exchange. But as your mother, I need you to stand beside me, not just silently in the background. We can reclaim our bond, Mark, together. Of course, Mom, he said earnestly, his eyes softening. I want to support you, I really do. There was a shift, a line drawn not with animosity but with clarity. For the first time, I felt empowered, lifting the veil that Sophia had tried to impose. As he reached across the table to hold my hand, a sense of connection poured back into our relationship, binding us tight once more. Those words became a bridge, and slowly, with care, we began to build a path toward understanding, one deliberate step at a time. Yet, I understood this was merely the beginning of my confrontation with Sophia. I had to prepare for the war that was approaching. But for now, I felt the warmth of victory warming my heart, and my mantra echoed back, rooting me in the truth I would carry onward into battle. They can mute me at the table, never in my heart. A week passed since that talk with Mark. Each day I felt a mix of hope and anxiety build within me. I'd reinforced my bond with my son. Now I had to face Sophia. Super Bowl Sunday was approaching, and it would be our battleground, an event that had been a staple of family togetherness. As the day neared, I busied myself in the kitchen, gathering ingredients and dusting off old recipes for wings and chili. The scent of comfort wafted through my home, mingling with the tension that simmered in my mind. I knew Sophia would come armed with her usual barbs, eager to undermine my attempts to reclaim my place at the table. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Sophia, radiating confidence as if she owned the air around her. "Looks nice in here, Eleanor. What, trying out for a cooking show?" she remarked, striding inside uninvited. "Just making our game day a bit special," I replied evenly, turning back to the kitchen where the familiar smell enveloped me like a shield. Mark arrived shortly after, and I could see the tension flicker between him and Sophia. As we settled down to watch the game, I let stories of past Super Bowl Sundays pour forth, letting nostalgia paint the scene. Mark smiled as I recounted our history, the laughter and connections that had bonded us. Every recollection became a lifeline, anchoring us to a shared past that Sophia could try to overshadow but never erase. As the game rolled on, Sophia made pointed digs about my cooking and old traditions. My stomach knotted, but I refused to back down this time. "You know, Sophia, every dish tells a story. The wings are part of our family's tradition," I said, firming my resolve. Mark glanced at me, then at her, the tension in the room palpable. I sensed his heart racing, caught between the two women in his life. "Mom, I've always loved those memories," he said. "Maybe we shouldn't just let them fade away." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Mark, your mother is stuck in the past and it's cute but not practical." Gritting my teeth, I retorted, "Embracing new traditions doesn't mean ignoring the old ones. Family is built on memories, Sophia. You should know that." The air crackled with incredulity, but I drove on, my mantra echoing in my chest. "They can mute me at the table, never in my heart." Mark leaned forward, expressive determination illuminating his face. "Sophia, I thought we were just having fun. But Mom is right. We need to honor where we came from." The shift in the room was profound. Sophia's mask slipped as shock registered on her face. "Mark, you're taking her side?" she said incredulously. "This isn't about sides," he replied, voice firm. "It's about family, about what matters." The tension reached its peak, and I felt my heart race with a mix of exhilaration and fear. Would Mark really choose to leave Sophia's narrative behind? I gazed at him with unwavering conviction, feeling the veils of oppression gradually lift. As Sophia's brows furrowed in anger, I pressed on. "No one is denying new traditions, but our history and spirit matter. This family is built on love, and I refused to allow anyone to diminish that. I could see it in Mark's eyes, the understanding deepening, solidifying like a stone being placed in a foundation. Here we were, clearly in a confrontation, yet I felt no resentment. My heart was buoyed by the realization that he stood firmly by my side. In that moment, I truly understood what I had fought for. I wasn't merely reclaiming my space, I was also rewriting our family story together, guiding Mark toward seeing the truth beneath the superficial glamour Sophia presented. As the final seconds of the game dwindled away, I felt an exhilarating mix of liberation and empowerment. The reckoning had opened a space for both Mark and me, a chance to reshape our family's identity moving forward, acknowledging the past while embracing the future. The game may have come to a close, but this was only the beginning for us. I could finally breathe deeply, knowing that through resilience and unwavering love, we would face whatever came next together.